The ocean's surface may sparkle with calm beauty, but beneath lies a world of sudden, unpredictable danger. Even the strongest swimmers and most experienced divers can find themselves face to face with creatures whose instincts turn in an instant. From swift, unseen strikes to relentless underwater pursuits, these true stories reveal how quickly a peaceful moment at sea can transform into a desperate fight for survival. In this video, we'll dive into 6 harrowing encounters with wild marine life. On August 14, 2025, the sun began to rise slowly over the coast of Stinson Beach in California. The air felt cool, and the sky showed soft colors of pink and orange. A 30-year-old lifeguard named Erin Callahan had started her shift early. She had grown up near the ocean and spent most of her life swimming, running, and learning how to help others in danger. As a young girl, she had taken first aid classes, and by her 20s she had become a certified lifeguard with strong skills in both water rescue and ocean safety. She was known to locals for her bravery and steadiness, even in the most challenging situations. Her work at Stinson Beach had become part of her daily life. That morning, the sand was still empty and the waves rolled in gently. Erin walked along the shoreline, checking the water and making sure no debris had washed in overnight. Her eyes scanned the beach with care. As she moved toward a wide stretch near the tide line, she noticed a large, dark form moving slowly in the shallow water. It looked too big to be seaweed or driftwood. Curious, she walked closer and soon realized what it was. A massive great white shark about 12 feet long had washed into the shallows and was struggling to get free. Its body thrashed from side to side, and the water around it splashed in high sprays. The shark had likely followed a current too close to the shore and become stuck when the tide shifted. Erin had never seen one this close before. Her heart beat faster, but she stayed calm. She reached for her radio and called for help from the nearby lifeguard station. Knowing time was of the essence, she made a swift decision. She grabbed a thick rope from the supply box nearby and walked slowly into the water. She planned to loop the rope around the tail so the shark could be pulled into deeper water once help arrived. The water reached her knees as she moved closer, careful with each step. She stood behind the shark, which continued to toss and roll. The rope was in her hand and she reached out, ready to slip it over the tail. But just as she leaned forward, the animal twisted fast. Its head turned and in one powerful strike it bit into her lower leg. The teeth went deep, cutting through skin and muscle. A wave of pain hit her hard. The shark let go after the bite, but the damage had already been done. Erin screamed and dropped the rope, falling backward into the water. Blood spread quickly in red clouds around her. The shark thrashed again, trying to turn itself toward the open sea. Erin crawled back, using her arms to pull her body through the waves. Her leg hurt badly, and each move felt slow. She reached waist-deep water, still trying to get away as the tide shifted behind her. Backup was on the way, but the worst had already begun. Waves pushed softly around Erin as she pulled herself farther from the animal. Her hands scraped along the sand under the water and her injured leg dragged behind her. More blood spread in red clouds around her. The shark, now facing the sea again, gave one last twist and began to move with the current. It passed slowly into deeper water as more waves rolled in. The water stayed quiet after that, with only small ripples where the animal had vanished. Erin reached shallower ground and turned her body sideways, lying in the surf with her face turned upward. Her breath was fast, and her leg felt heavy. Soon, her co-workers reached her side, running across the beach with medical gear and stretchers. One of them knelt beside her and pressed a cloth over the damaged limb, while another lifted her shoulders and spoke calmly. Others stayed back, keeping beachgoers from coming too close. A rescue vehicle arrived and parked near the lifeguard station. 2 workers helped lift Erin onto a board and tied straps around her arms and waist to keep her still. Her body was lifted gently into the truck and the doors closed. Inside, the paramedics worked quickly. They cut away her wetsuit, cleaned the wound as best they could, and wrapped it in thick bandages to slow the bleeding. Her skin looked pale and sweat ran across her face as the pain grew stronger. The road to the hospital was long and winding. Every bump made her wince, but she stayed conscious. Once inside the emergency room, doctors and nurses took over. They washed the area again, took scans, and prepared for surgery. Her calf had been torn in many places and muscle had been badly damaged. The bite had missed bone, but tissue and nerves were affected. The operation took many hours, with surgeons working carefully to close the wounds and prevent more blood loss. After the procedure, she was moved into a recovery bed and covered with blankets. Machines monitored her heart, breathing, and blood pressure. Her family and co-workers visited, standing by her side as she rested. Her leg remained wrapped in clean cloth, and a tube brought medicine into her body to help with pain. Nurses checked her every hour, watching for signs of trouble. The beach reopened days later, but many remembered what had happened. Local news channels showed footage of the rescue. Signs were placed along the sand, warning visitors not to approach wild animals, even ones that appeared weak or stuck. Experts explained that large sea creatures still retained their strength and could strike quickly if touched. Erin stayed in the hospital for many weeks. Walking would take time and therapy would be needed to rebuild strength. But she had lived, and her effort to help had not been forgotten. Her actions reminded everyone that the ocean always holds risk, even when the danger seems helpless on dry land. On April 11, 2025, under a blazing sun in Kailua Bay, Matt Donovan prepared for another day of thrills. At 32 years old, he had established a reputation on social media as someone who lived for adventure. From mountain biking to cliff jumping, Matt was always chasing excitement. He had recently taken up flyboarding, a sport where water pressure lifts the rider high into the air. It had quickly become one of his favorite things to do, especially in the clear Hawaiian waters. Friends often joined him, filming tricks from the shore to post later online. That afternoon, the beach was crowded with people taking advantage of the heat. Matt checked his gear, tightened his safety straps, and gave a quick signal to the jet ski operator. The board roared to life and powerful jets of water lifted him into the sky. He moved in fast curves, rising and falling with each burst. Cheers came from the beach as he flew above the sea like a superhero. He turned and spun, twisting his body before diving back into the ocean with loud splashes. For nearly 20 minutes, Matt continued his performance. Each time he fell, he returned to the surface laughing and smiling. His final trick was a large flip from high above, landing far from the shallow edge. The water there was darker and deeper. He crashed down hard, sending bubbles and waves in all directions. The sound and motion spread fast through the sea. Below, near the edge of a rocky drop-off, a tiger shark had been swimming slowly. The sudden splash caught its attention. The animal, over 12 feet long, turned and followed the path of noise and movement. Its body moved with strength and control as it came closer to the surface. Matt floated for a second, catching his breath. The surface calmed around him. Then, a dark shadow rose from the depths beneath. Without a sound, the shark rushed upward and struck. Its open mouth clamped down on Matt's lower leg, biting with force. Pain shot through him and a cry escaped as water filled his mouth. The grip was tight, its teeth cutting deep into muscle and bone. Matt kicked and twisted, trying to get free. The flyboard jets were still running, and the stream of water blasted into the shark's face. The powerful rush confused the predator, and it let go for a moment. Blood swirled fast in the water as Matt tried to swim. The shark turned, circling slowly with its wide head moving side to side. The jet ski rider saw what had happened and reacted fast. He pulled hard on the throttle, sending the board racing forward with Matt hanging on. Water splashed behind them as the beach grew closer. A red trail stretched across the sea, marking the path back to land. The worst part had ended, but Matt's fight had only begun. The jet ski reached the shallow edge of the beach, and Matt was pulled closer to land by two people who had been watching from the shore. His body was limp, and his face showed pain and fear. His right leg was torn badly, with skin open and blood soaking through the torn fabric. One man grabbed a towel from a nearby bag and pressed it against the wound, while another person ran to alert the lifeguards. The sound of people shouting filled the air as beachgoers moved back, giving space to those trying to help. Within minutes, paramedics arrived with a stretcher and emergency gear. Matt was lifted carefully onto the board, his leg raised to reduce bleeding. A thick wrap was placed over the injured area, and pressure was applied to stop further blood loss. A mask was placed over his nose to help him breathe, and his skin had turned a pale color. He drifted in and out of awareness as the team worked quickly to control the damage. The beach had turned silent, the waves soft in the background as people watched in disbelief. The ambulance raced toward the nearest hospital. Inside, Matt was connected to machines that monitored his heart and oxygen levels. More fluids were given to prevent shock. The torn part of his leg continued to bleed slowly despite the bandages. Pain medicine was given to calm his body as the doctors at the hospital prepared for immediate treatment. The injury had gone deep, and there were signs of broken bones in his lower limb. Scans were taken as soon as he arrived, showing that the bone had cracked in more than one place, and some muscle had been completely damaged. Surgery began soon after. A group of specialists worked for hours to clean the area, remove pieces that could not be saved, and try to keep as much of the leg as possible. Some muscle tissue was lost, and steel pins were used to support the broken parts of the bone. The deep bite had caused swelling and nerve harm, and doctors warned that healing would take a long time. After the surgery was finished, Matt was moved to a quiet room with soft lights and cold air. He rested with thick bandages around his leg and wires connected to his chest. The news of the accident spread quickly across the island. News teams shared photos, and water sports groups discussed what had happened. Safety teams were dispatched to inspect the area, and warning signs were posted along the bay. Flyers warned visitors about the dangers of animals near deep water drop-offs. Lifeguards were given updated first aid tools and instructed to be vigilant during busy hours. Some flyboard groups paused their activities while new safety steps were planned. Matt's family arrived the next day and stayed close to his bedside. He was still weak and could not walk. Physical therapy would take weeks, maybe longer. His story served as a poignant reminder that wild seas demand respect. The fun of adventure could change without warning, and the sea always held its own rules. March 20th, 2025, the waters near Dyer Island, South Africa, were calm beneath a bright morning sky. Marcus, a 42-year-old underwater photographer, had always dreamed of exploring these waters with his wife, Elina. The couple had traveled from Sweden, spending months planning the trip. Marcus had been diving for over a decade, capturing sea life through his lens. Elina had joined him on many of these journeys, but this trip was special. They were both trained and confident, excited to see the reef and its colors. That day, they boarded a small dive boat with a local crew and prepared for a deep descent into the kelp forest. Their gear was checked twice: masks, tanks, fins, all ready. Marcus clipped his camera to his vest, a tool he had used many times before. The captain pointed out the best place to dive, and soon they entered the cool sea. The water wrapped around them like a gentle blanket as they sank lower, side by side. The sun shone through the moving kelp leaves, creating light shapes that danced across the ocean floor. Fish moved between the stalks and small bubbles rose from their regulators. Everything felt calm, peaceful, and just as they had hoped. They floated near a patch of coral, and Marcus raised his camera to capture a school of silver fish. Elina hovered beside him, watching closely. Then, without sound or warning, something large moved in the distance. A shape came from the deeper blue, fast and direct. In a split second, the calm water turned to chaos. A massive great white shark appeared, its wide body rushing forward with sudden speed. The shark struck Marcus with full force, its head slamming into his chest. Its jaws opened and clamped around his middle. The bite crushed through his suit and ribs in one snap. Blood exploded into the water, mixing with the bubbles and scattering the fish. Elina turned sharply, eyes wide behind her mask. She reached out, grabbing his arm, trying to hold on, but the shark twisted its body, shaking him like a rag. Marcus slipped from her grip as the shark dragged him into deeper water. The camera, still clipped to his vest, broke loose and dropped slowly through the cloud of red. Elina's scream could not be heard through the gear, but her body froze. She kicked upward, her heart pounding. More blood filled the space around her. Other divers had noticed the scene and began swimming toward her. Marcus was gone, pulled into the dark by the predator. As Elina reached the surface, she thrashed in panic. The crew on the boat spotted her and rushed to help. Arms pulled her out of the sea. Her mask was ripped off, and her breath came in sharp bursts. Divers searched for Marcus but found nothing, only a torn wetsuit piece and the shattered camera floated nearby. The sea had turned silent again, but everything had changed in an instant. Elina sat wrapped in a dry towel as the boat sped back to shore. Her hands trembled and her face stayed blank. The ocean wind passed over her skin, but she felt nothing. Crew members remained close, trying to keep her steady. Her body moved with the motion of the boat, but her thoughts were stuck in the water. The image of Marcus disappearing into the deep played again and again in her mind. No words were spoken. The sky was still clear, but everything felt dark around her. At the dock, medical staff waited. They helped her onto a stretcher, though she had no injuries. Her wetsuit was removed and she was checked for shock. She stared at the sky as the questions began, but she gave no answers. Her lips stayed closed, her eyes wide. Divers met with local officials to explain what had happened. They told how the animal had struck without warning. They described the color of the water and the sound of the struggle. Nothing else had been found. The search had continued for hours, but the sea had swallowed all traces. The news spread quickly. People across the area spoke about the strike near Dyer Island. Some remembered older events. Others feared what might come next. Local divers paused their work, and tour companies canceled planned outings. Posters were placed near the beaches warning about movement in the area. Experts were called to review safety rules. A comprehensive report was compiled, detailing conditions, water depth, and equipment. Cameras were checked and dive logs studied. They looked for clues but found little that could explain the reason. Elena remained at a small guest house near the water. Friends from home called to offer comfort. She answered only once, then stayed silent. A counselor was brought in to help her speak. Over time, she shared what she had seen. She described the light in the kelp, the sudden rush, and the force of the impact. Her words came slowly, her hands folding tightly in her lap. She wept quietly, her voice low and heavy. The counselor stayed beside her, listening and helping her breathe through each memory. A memorial was planned days later. It was held on a quiet hill overlooking the sea. Small flowers were placed in the sand. People gathered with candles and simple signs. Marcus's name was spoken aloud, followed by a long moment of silence. The sound of waves filled the air. Elena stood alone, holding a framed photo. The wind lifted her hair as she looked out toward the endless blue. No one interrupted her thoughts. A soft song played from a small speaker nearby. It was a tune Marcus had loved. After the service, Elena packed her things and returned home. Her suitcase felt heavier than before. She left her diving gear and camera behind. She would not return to the ocean soon. Her days became quiet, filled with long walks and short talks. Marcus had loved the sea, but it had taken him in one breath. His story joined others, remembered by those who knew how wild the water could be. On August 11, 2025, the sky above the Norwegian coast was soft and gray as visitors gathered at a marine park outside Bergen. Families filled the small outdoor stadium, excited to watch one of the park's most popular shows. At the center of it all was Liv Anderson, a 46-year-old orca trainer who had worked with marine animals for over 2 decades. Liv had joined the park in her early 20s after studying marine biology. Over the years, she had trained dolphins, seals, and finally orcas. She had built a strong connection with Caro, a large male killer whale who weighed nearly 6 tons. Liv trusted him deeply and believed in his gentle side. Their bond was often described by the park as special, one built through years of carefully established routines and shared moments. That day's performance was part of a summer show, designed to highlight the intelligence and grace of the orca. The pool was large and clear, with platforms around the edges for the trainers to stand and direct the animals. Music played softly through speakers as Liv stepped onto the stage, waving to the crowd. Caro swam in slow circles below, waiting for the first signal. The routine began smoothly, with the animal rising into the air, spinning and diving on command. Liv moved from one edge of the platform to the other, clapping her hands and guiding each motion with practiced ease. Midway through the act, the routine shifted to a jump sequence. Caro was supposed to leap high beside the platform as Liv performed a spin, but as she turned, her foot landed on a damp spot and she slipped forward. In a flash, her body hit the surface of the water with a loud splash. The music kept playing, and for a second, no one moved. Liv came up quickly, gasping, and tried to reach the nearby edge. Before she could swim far, a dark shape rose beneath her. Caro approached fast, and instead of helping her to safety as he had done in past drills, he moved straight toward her with his mouth open. In one sudden motion, his jaws closed tightly around her upper arm. The crowd gasped. Liv's body was yanked under the surface. The water churned as the orca dove deep, dragging her below. Her legs kicked hard, and her free hand clawed at the water as she disappeared into the pool's depths. Underwater, she struggled to free herself. She hit the side of Caro's face and tried to push his jaw open. The water filled with bubbles and swirls of red. The animal circled once more before finally letting go. Liv's body floated upward slowly, her arm badly torn. Staff along the edges jumped into action. She surfaced, coughing and shaking, barely able to move as the team threw out poles and ropes to pull her toward the ledge. The joyful show had changed in seconds. The animal was pulled into a separate section of the pool, and the trainers rushed to stop more harm. Liv lay at the water's edge, eyes shut, blood running down her side. Lifeguards reached Liv within moments, pulling her from the edge of the pool and laying her gently on a dry mat nearby. Her breathing was shallow and her face had turned white. One team member held her legs up while another pressed firm towels against the wounded arm. Blood soaked the towels quickly, dripping onto the smooth tiles. Her fingers were twisted, and deep marks ran from shoulder to elbow. Her eyes blinked slowly, barely open, and her lips moved without sound. Emergency workers arrived within minutes, guided by staff waving from the entrance. The medical crew lowered a stretcher beside her, moving fast but with care. One paramedic cleaned the area around the wound while another slid an oxygen mask over her nose. A tourniquet was wrapped above the injury to slow the bleeding. The crowd had been moved away by security, but whispers and tense faces remained just beyond the main gate. Children held on to their parents. Some cried. Others asked if the trainer would be okay. Park managers met with police near the edge of the pool, answering quick questions and showing video clips from security cameras. Trainers stood together, their uniforms wet and faces full of worry. Inside the ambulance, Liv was given fluids and pain medicine. The drive to the hospital was short, but every second felt long. Her heart rate rose and fell as doctors waited on the other end. At the hospital, she was taken directly into surgery. The doctors studied the damage. Her upper arm was broken in several places. Muscles and tendons were torn. The bone was cracked and pushed out of line. The team worked for hours to stop bleeding and save what they could. Metal pins were placed to hold the bone together. Torn tissue was cleaned and stitched. The cuts were deep, but they managed to keep the arm attached. When the surgery ended, she was moved into a quiet recovery room with machines monitoring her body signs. News of the event spread fast across the country. Headlines appeared on television and websites. Many could not believe the animal had turned on someone it had known for so long. Experts offered their opinions, stating that even the most well-trained wild animals could act without warning. Animal rights groups spoke out, saying the orca should never have been in captivity for so many years. Some called for changes to the laws. Others shared messages of support for Liv and her long work with marine life. The park was closed for several days. All shows were stopped. Kara was moved to a separate tank with no public access. Staff held meetings to talk about safety and new rules. Some trainers decided to step away from animal work altogether. Liv stayed in the hospital for weeks. Her body healed slowly, and therapy was initiated to help her regain the use of her arm. The pain remained, and movement was hard. The sea, once a place of joy for her, had become something different. Though she had spent years near the water, her future now looked uncertain. On August 10, 2020, the bright sun over Fort Lauderdale lit up the clear waters near the coast. Tourists strolled along the beach, while others watched from boats as people engaged in thrilling water sports. One of them was Jake, a 29-year-old man who had become well known in local extreme sports groups. He was a strong athlete who loved fast action, sharp turns, and the thrill of flying above the sea. Born and raised in Florida, Jake had grown up near the ocean. From a young age, he had tried every water activity he could: surfing, diving, and later, flyboarding. That had become his favorite. Flyboarding used a water-powered jet system that lifted him high above the surface. With practice, Jake had learned to control the board with skill. He spent weekends teaching others and posting videos of flips and tricks online. That day, he planned to try a new move near a deep drop-off area. His friends stood nearby with phones ready to film. The sea looked calm. Boats drifted far out, and the water below sparkled in the sun. Jake gave a small wave before blasting into the air with a strong push of water. He flew up about 15 feet, turning his body in midair. Cheers came from the beach. As he finished the spin, Jake leaned forward to drop fast. His board hit the surface with a loud splash. The water around him foamed and swirled. He sank quickly into the deeper part of the sea. For a second, all he heard was the bubbling of water in his ears. Then he kicked upward, breaking the surface and taking a sharp breath. But something else had felt the noise. Below, in the shadows of the deeper part, a bull shark had been moving slowly. The loud impact and fast splashing had caught its attention. It turned sharply toward the sound and moved up fast. Jake wiped water from his eyes. He floated near the surface, unaware of what was rising under him. The next moment changed everything. A sudden hit came from below, fast and strong. The shark's open mouth clamped down hard on Jake's lower leg. Pain shot through his body as sharp teeth tore through his wetsuit and deep into his muscle. He screamed and twisted. The flyboard stayed attached to his feet, and in panic, Jake swung the heavy nozzle around. It hit the shark across the head once, then again. Water churned around them as blood spread into the sea. The shark pulled back but circled close, eyeing him again. Jake swung once more, hitting near its side. The animal turned and slowly drifted away, vanishing into the deeper water. Jake gasped and waved his arms. His friends, now screaming from the jet ski, sped toward him. Blood followed him as he floated near the surface, one hand raised for help. The fight was over, but the damage was done. Blood continued to spill into the sea as Jake floated, his arms heavy and weak. The jet ski reached him fast, and two friends leaned over, pulling him up with care. His leg dragged behind, torn open, leaving red trails in the water. They laid him across the seat and pressed a thick towel against the open injury. His skin had lost its color, and his body shook. The engine roared as they turned sharply toward shore. Waves splashed over them, but the rider kept control, moving as fast as possible. When they reached the beach, people rushed to help. A lifeguard ran forward with a large bag, pulling out wraps and gloves. Others cleared a path in the sand. Jake was carried to a shaded spot where towels and surfboards were used to support him. One person held his hand while another poured clean water over the torn flesh. The lifeguard wrapped the wound tightly and checked his breathing. A call had already gone out, and the sound of sirens grew louder. Paramedics arrived in minutes. They placed an oxygen mask on his face and lifted him gently onto a stretcher. His leg was raised and covered with a clean bandage. One medic pressed down on the bleeding while another placed a tube into his arm. His pulse was checked repeatedly as they moved him toward the ambulance. The doors closed, and the vehicle sped away, lights flashing as it pushed through traffic. Inside the hospital, doctors stood ready. The stretcher was rolled down a bright hallway into a large room. A nurse cut away the rest of his suit, and the wound was cleaned. Pieces of his muscle were torn, and deep cuts had exposed inner layers. His bones were damaged from the bite, and blood loss had made his body weak. The medical team moved fast. Fluids were given, pain medicine was added, and he was rushed into surgery. The operation took hours. Surgeons worked to remove loose tissue and thoroughly clean the area. Metal pins were placed inside the broken bone, and many stitches were used to close the skin. His leg was wrapped in thick layers, and the room was quiet except for the beeping of monitors. After the surgery, he was moved to a dark room to rest. Nurses checked on him every few minutes, watching his chest rise and fall slowly. Back at the beach, news of the attack spread fast. Water sports groups issued warnings, and experts cautioned about the potential for things to go wrong quickly. Flyers were distributed with new guidelines on where and when to use loud equipment. Vibrations in water could attract large animals without warning. Many riders stayed away for days, and safety patrols grew larger. Jake stayed in the hospital for over a week. His leg would need months to heal, and doctors said more surgery might be required. His story was shared in safety classes and local schools. What started as fun had turned into a lesson no one would forget. On May 13, 2025, the coastal waters off Queensland shimmered under a bright morning sun. Emma Clark, a 36-year-old nurse and mother of one, had planned a peaceful paddle with her young daughter Sophie before the day grew too hot. Emma lived in a quiet neighborhood not far from the beach and often brought her daughter to the sea to teach her about nature. Sophie, just 8 years old, had recently learned how to kayak with her mom in a tandem boat. The ocean gave them time together, away from phones and busy schedules. That morning, they packed snacks, sunscreen, and a small waterproof camera, hoping to spot dolphins or turtles while gliding over the calm, clear water. The kayak was bright orange, floating smoothly over the shallow reef. They wore light wetsuits for sun protection, and Sophie held a small paddle while Emma guided from the back. Seagulls called in the sky, and the sea moved gently beneath them. Fish darted below in little silver flashes, and the air smelled of salt and warmth. Everything felt safe and quiet as they moved farther from the beach, keeping within sight of lifeguard flags on shore. Emma noticed small ripples ahead and slowed their pace. Sophie leaned forward, pointing toward a group of small fish swimming in circles. Below them, coral patches could be seen through the water, soft shapes in pink and brown. But not far away, something larger began to stir. A black-tipped shark, sleek and curious, was moving slowly through the water. The motion of the kayak and splashing paddles had caught its attention. It came closer, its fins cutting through the sea with quiet speed. In a flash, the shark struck. It bit into the side of the kayak near the middle, shaking the boat and tilting it sharply. The sudden hit knocked Emma off balance. She slipped from her seat and fell into the water with a loud splash. Her arms flailed as she tried to regain control. The kayak rocked again, and Sophie clung tightly to the sides, trying not to fall in. The shark circled once, then darted at Emma's leg, its teeth slicing through her wetsuit. She kicked hard, her foot hitting the water's surface. The shark twisted and moved back, turning in a wide loop under the kayak. Emma fought to stay calm, moving her arms quickly and pushing herself toward the boat. Sophie remained quiet, gripping the edge and watching her mother with wide eyes. Emma reached the kayak and pulled herself up, sliding back into her seat with effort. Her leg burned with pain, but she looked down and saw no major injury, only a bleeding cut across her calf. The shark was gone now, leaving only small waves in its path. For a few seconds, neither mother nor daughter moved. The sea had gone quiet again, but the fear stayed in their eyes. What had started as a peaceful trip had turned into a moment they would never forget. Emma sat stiffly in the back of the kayak, holding the paddle with one hand while using the other to apply pressure to her wounded leg. The boat floated gently and Sophie still clung to the front, her eyes fixed on the water, unspoken. Small drops of blood slipped from the torn wetsuit into the sea, making Emma more alert. Her breathing was fast and her muscles were tight, but she knew they had to move quickly. With a short push, she began guiding them back toward the beach, keeping her eyes scanning the water for any signs of movement. The paddle felt heavy and every stroke sent a sharp pain through her body. Sophie stayed low, her grip firm, waiting for her mother's instructions that never came. The kayak wobbled slightly, but remained upright. A light breeze started to blow and the beach flags looked closer with every minute. Emma could not stop thinking about what had just happened. The size of the shadow, the sharp bite, the force of the strike. It had all happened so fast, but now it stayed in her thoughts like a storm that would not fade. A few other beach visitors had seen the commotion in the distance and were already waving from the shore. One lifeguard ran to the water's edge as the orange boat reached the shallow area. Emma used her paddle to steer them toward the soft, sandy shore. Her leg was now throbbing badly, and the bleeding had not slowed much. When the front of the kayak touched land, several people rushed forward. A man held the kayak steady while another reached to lift Sophie out. Others helped Emma, who leaned on one side to keep pressure off her injured leg. She tried to smile at her daughter, who had not cried but still looked pale and confused. The lifeguards carried Emma to a shaded area and unzipped her wetsuit around the wound. The injury had not damaged bone but had torn through the skin deeply, leaving raw edges and swelling. A medic cleaned the area and wrapped it with firm padding to stop the bleeding. An ambulance was called from the parking lot, and a small crowd gathered quietly nearby. Sophie sat beside her mother, holding her hand and refusing to let go. At the hospital, Emma was taken to a clean room, where doctors looked closely at the wound. They stitched the torn skin and gave her medicine to ease the pain. Sophie waited in a chair beside the bed, her small legs swinging. Nurses brought them food and water and a soft blanket for comfort. That night, Emma was allowed to rest in the hospital, while Sophie stayed with her grandparents nearby. The next morning, news of the incident had reached local news stations. Safety teams placed warning signs near the same beach and reminded visitors to avoid sharp turns or splashing in shallow water. Emma's story was shared as an example of how even smaller sharks could cause fear and injury. She had survived, and her daughter had stayed calm. Together, they had made it through a moment that could have ended very differently.